Welcome, everyone. Welcome to another podcast episode of Towards Agility. And today we have a guest with us, Victor Loke. So I'll hand over to him for introduction and then we deep dive into our conversation. So over to you, Victor.
Oh, thanks, Khurram. It's a pleasure to be here. Hi everyone. My name is Victor. I'm an enterprise coach based in Singapore. Have been running my own practice for a little over 4 years now. And like Khurram, I'm an organizer, in particular for the Agile Singapore user group that's based locally. And we organize the annual regional Scrum Gathering Singapore conferences, of which we had the privilege of hosting Khurram for
Yes.
this year, just this year in August. So thank you for that, Khurram, for being here. And yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, so I have met Victor when he was here in Stockholm for Region Scrum Gathering. Then I met him again in Munich. And I traveled to Singapore and for they were like organizing an event there, Region Scrum Gathering. It was very nice to be there in a different culture with different weather. Definitely it was warm, but it was very nice to be there. So, Victor, the topic that we discuss is about human agency and how it's pertaining to the self-management. So, for our listeners who might not be familiar with this terminology, human
Mhm.
agency, could you briefly mention what it is?
Oh wow. Yes, Horam, that's essential for us to know as a definition. Um, so when I refer to human agency in the context of Agile, I'm really referring to the ability and the capacity for individuals to make independent decisions in the best interests of their company, their purpose, their careers.
Mm-hmm.
And to some extent, um, I believe that agency extends to the collective good of
Mm-hmm.
the team as well as the organization.
Hmm. Can you explain that a bit with an example to make it more simplify?
Okay, so it's been my experience that people's behaviors are
Mm-hmm.
shaped a great deal by the environment in which they are in.
Hmm.
And unbeknownst to us, right, it's oftentimes um, the environment that we've been put into that results in us being a certain way, right? And I give this example of how we behave in a professional setting,
Mm-hmm.
say at the workplace
Mm-hmm.
versus how we may behave in a social setting, say with friends or at a gathering or at a
Mm-hmm.
meetup, and say at home with family.
Hmm.
We tend to be all of us, we tend to behave very differently. And it's not like we are being two-faced or three-faced,
Hmm.
right? It's very much the environment and um, what I think is a form of isopraxism with this, which is reflection of reflecting how uh, people interact with us, and in turn how we respond back to people that makes us show up the way we do, right? And um, To that point, I think agency in an organization pertains largely to having a sense of purpose, right? That
Mm-hmm.
speaks to why one wants to be in that organization,
Hmm.
and how that might look like can differ greatly from people to people, right?
So, so,
Um,
so can we say,
yeah.
is it because I remember doing a similar work when I was working at PayPal. We did the work on sense of belonging. And the sense of belonging was we were trying to understand what is the motivation for people to work in this organization and where or we can support that. And I think you mentioned a very interesting point is like it's the environment around us. Then we react to, I mean, not react, but how we respond to that environment. It could be um very similar to the psychological safety, that we cannot really create psychological safety, but we can create an environment where psychological safety can happen. So what you are referring to more is about the environment where we are, wherever we are. So I mean,
Yes.
it's like when I was in Singapore, and one of the thing I was trying to observe is like how this culture is working, how people are, for example, behaving in a restaurant or in a line when they queue up, and I mean, in terms of cleanliness, in terms of, I mean, I got to know that if you cross the red signal, that is considered very bad in Singapore. And okay, no, my question is, uh, since we are talking in the context of, I mean, we can say organization or leadership or agile, how human agency this actually reflects in self-managing agile teams.
Ah, yes. So this is a really important question, and I think oftentimes we, or at least organizational leaders, tend to overlook this.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, is that the premise of self-management is agency,
Mm.
meaning people must both be empowered, which means I don't really like to use the word empowered because it's a little overused these days in
Oh
my
yes, it
estimation.
is very overused.
Oh, and blasphemized to some extent.
Oh,
But yeah, so when I say empowered, I really mean they are authorized
mm,
to make decisions, right?
mm,
So they must first be authorized. They have the decision right about how they do their work, how they manage their work, right? So this is the first thing. And then the second thing is they must also be willing to adopt that accountability.
mm,
Now, one of the challenges that I see, or I should say, we could call this an anti-pattern, right, in
mm,
Christopher Alexander's terms, but um, is that oftentimes we see organizations where authority is not commensurate with of responsibility,
mm,
right? So what I mean, for example, is at least in my personal encounters coaching organizations,
yeah.
I see it being very commonplace where managers would delegate work to someone, right? And that someone, therefore, has to bear the responsibility of um, that work
Outcome of
that's
the work.
delegated. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. But at the same time, he or she is not given the authority to carry out or the commensurate level of authority to carry out that work, right?
Mm,
And then this is some of us call this uh the NAG, which is the no authority gauntlet. You know, like Thanos wears that gauntlet.
aha.
And,
Oh,
and the reason it's called NAG is because the only thing they can do is to nag at their
ah.
colleagues to get work done.
Yeah,
Right?
but Victor, I mean, you mentioned this phrase, and it very quickly resonated to me with one of the team I was working with. The management was very giving them, you are empowered to do these things. The team came up with a number of improvements, but they had no authority to make those improvements.
Right. Exactly. And this is the um, anti-pattern that we so commonly see in team retrospectives, which is why at the same time we see teams gradually not doing their sprint retrospectives, right? Because
Yeah.
whatever they came up with during the retrospectives,
Hmm.
they are not given the authority to act or to improve.
Hmm.
So how is the organization going to learn? How are they going to adapt? And that, in my view, is fundamentally unagile.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about the agile or this stuff, we might have very similarities. We have discussed offline as well. I understand to a certain extent, but what I'm curious to understand is like, where do we lose? Where, I mean, in terms of the teams or whatever team we are, where do we lose this sense of agency then? I mean, we know this
Ah,
is happening, but
powerful
where do we
question.
lose it?
Yeah, powerful and essential question. So I've seen agency, well, maybe losing is just one way to frame it.
Mm-hmm.
More often the case, I find agency wasn't there to begin with.
Hmm.
Um, or I should say, was very limited to begin with. Um, so points where I think agency tends to be lost is uh, primarily culture.
Mm-hmm.
Say in the East, we tend to have a high power distance culture.
Hmm.
So agency tends to be a foreign concept in the East as a result. And the second point, as you mentioned, psychological safety, which, in some ways is related to culture, but it could also be due to organizational culture more so than a broader social landscape, right?
Hmm.
And the third might just be the stress that comes with the particular organizational context. Because if
Hmm.
teams are firefighting from one point to the next, then managers being anxious and stressed out, they tend to assert authority on the
Hmm.
teams. And when teams are continually made to service the demands of management,
Hmm.
they disengage.
Hmm.
So yeah, these are three, I would say, important contributors to a loss of sense of agency.
So you mean to say that the culture, we have the power distance, then the safety and the complexity of the work that we're doing.
Complexity,
What was the last one?
perhaps. Urgency, maybe
Okay.
more, stress levels and urgency, if the organization is always in the mode of operating and operations and delivery and then always in sort of in flight. It's
Yeah.
hard for them to sort of, center themselves and to reconsider what truly matters to them.
But I mean, w- so another question to you. I mean, since you have done a lot of work in this human agency domain, so how myself or a team who's going through this situation can tell a difference between, oh, we choose to do this or this was imposed on us? How can we distinguish these two uh, patterns?
Hmm. So we're touching on something that most of us people don't
Hmm.
think of very consciously all the time, which is the notion of a boundary.
Hmm.
And this worries me because um, we all know boundaries are essential,
Yes.
right? Because they can be, in the worst case, they can be violating or come across as violating. And but yet, if well designed, right, then it creates a sense of purpose
Hmm.
and authority, right, in a meaningful way. Yet, it's also boundaries are also the concept that I find management really l- getting themselves involved in way too much.
Hmm.
Right. Um, we don't think about boundaries all the time, and this is why we get situations where uh, authoritarian style leaders come in and uh, assert their influence in an
Mm-hmm.
aggressive manner that would make or sort of push the organization to behave in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
So the it's not often clear, I think. I think it all come to your question, it all comes down to individual uh both individual and collective awareness, particularly so when I say collective, particularly at the team level when we talk about Scrum and Agile. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's essential. And that's also one of the things I think as coaches uh, is why we are there, is to teach the team to identify and to agree on boundaries.
So, I mean, that could be the next question. Like now we have understood the team situation. We have talked about, I mean, briefly about the organization. People like you and me, who main motivation or intention is to um, work with the people, improve the process, and also focus on the delivery as well. So, what are your thoughts? How the Scrum Masters or coaches, let it be executive level, how we can help in this situation?
Uh, so in this situation, meaning when management plays on the boundaries of teams
So, I mean,
or
if I rephrase this question, what I was intending to look is how we can create this more feeling of agency. Uh,
oh,
yeah.
it's highly contextual. I think it looks very different in the East versus the West. So as you know, being in Sweden,
Mm.
um, these at least I find when I was there it to be a rather liberating environment where um, the democratization of decision rights is a natural thing to expect in an
Yes,
organization,
it is.
right?
I would say it is.
Right. And you come from Pakistan, which is a polar opposite. So that's what I mean. And it's like it's going to look very different first and foremost, right? Between a country like Sweden and Pakistan, and
Mm.
in my estimation, in between would somewhere in between would be Singapore.
Yeah, could be. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there is the generational gap. It's been my observation that more senior leaders in terms of age, right, tend to expect authority by way of power much more so than the younger generation leaders.
Hmm.
Right?
Hmm.
Speak more closely to the millennial culture.
Hmm.
So depending on that context, the interventions that we introduce as coaches would look very different, naturally. Not least to say the sort of company we're talking about. Is it an operational company like McDonald's, or is it a research and development company, a product company, software company?
Hmm.
And then the composition of the organization, whether they are primarily locals, or do they have a rich mix of foreigners across geographies? All of that would matter.
Hmm.
So yeah, perhaps we could pick one, and I could, or a few, and I could suggest something.
Yeah, I
Um,
think uh, you mentioned an interesting point here. Like, yes, I'm born and raised in Pakistan. Then I spent like almost 2 decades in Sweden. So I feel like my interaction has also been changed. It has been influenced a lot with the people that I have been living in, the people I have been working with. As you mentioned, that we tend to respond to the situation or environment where we are in. And I have done some workshops in Pakistan and other where the power distance culture with the power distance gap is greater. And when I have been telling people about the self-managing and they can take their decisions on their own, they don't need to ask like 3 or 4 levels up of management. And it was surprise and also at the same time shocking for them. It's like, how is this even possible? And one thing that I have realized is that it's again how the environment has been making impact over the longer period of the time, that I don't know how I put it, like people have, I mean, like, it could be a question, have people lost the capability to think on their own? Rather waiting for someone else to make a decision, uh, why cannot a group of people can come together to make a decision? I mean, no, there is another one is like, if you want to include that other person into the decision making as well, like the person, like the manager, that could be different level of delegation, the decision making delegation. But this is often I would say I also have observed here in Sweden.
Mm.
There are teams who are just waiting for someone else to come to make a decision. And I just want to, I would like to hear your view on this. What I'm explaining is that when I looked and when I studied the history or the culture of the organization, I got to know that people have been quite concerned about making a decision, even though it was a clarity for them what to decide, but there was some kind of accountability, and people were not willing to take that accountability, or someone else was not willing them to take a decision. So, what do you think about that?
Oh yeah. So you've touched on several great points, Kuram, and that's been my observation as well. Same thing. Just because people are given the authority to make a decision doesn't mean they want to do it, right? Which was
Mm,
to my second point earlier about willingness, right? They must be willing to adopt the accountability that is commensurate, right, with that responsibility of making the decision. And it's been my experience that not enough agile coaches um, are sensitive to this notion, um, which is probably the most important part about agile teams. Now, willingness cannot be trained.
yes, it
And
cannot
I
be.
don't know why agile coaches just go into teaching Scrum, Kanban, and overlooking the fact that you cannot make someone want to be accountable for something.
Oh yes, oh
Yeah,
yes.
that has to come from the environment, which purpose could play a part, as well as other and extrinsic and intrinsic motivations.
Mm,
So this is why agile coaching warrants a real coaching conversation with individuals and teams to understand why they are where they are in the organization,
yes.
why they want to be there, or if they even want to be there.
Yeah,
And they might not know, right?
I totally. I think you made a very important point there, Victor. Um, it could also be the willingness of the organization, how much they want to adapt to the situation. I recently had a conversation with one of the person who joined the workshop. He said that they were able to have those people work during the weekend, but the quality of the work turned out to be really bad. So they end up spending more in order to save some time. They end up spending double the amount of the time to fix the problem. So you're right. We we cannot really force people. But the question is like, we have spoken about the accountability. People might be afraid of accountability, and people just want to get done with the things that they are assigned to do. And but how could a positive accountability look like?
So- Okay, so I'm going to go. This is a great question because I think it's inevitable in large organizations.
Mm,
Now, why do I say that? It's because I find that, in large organizations especially, that we are going to get a spectrum of
mm,
people who are there for different reasons,
yes,
right? And some people are there just to get by, just to get a salary, and then they want to knock off on time to be
Mm,
somewhere else for some other reasons. And that's fair, right? People have different motivations for doing what they do, and they may well be in that organization with that expectation.
mm,
And they simply do not desire taking on greater responsibility that they currently are taking on, right? There's a different appetite for responsibility and seniority in different people. So whilst we could, as coaches, harp, for lack of a better word, harp on the importance of adopting greater individual responsibility in the
mm,
workplace. In their mind, perhaps to them, they have a greater duty to be at home, caring for their family at this
mm.
time, to be back to prepare dinner or to teach their children homework, whatever it may be.
Yes.
And I don't think it's our place as organizational leaders to judge them for what they consider to be purposeful in their lives,
Mm,
right? But that's not to say that it's not going to limit them in terms of how much accountability they want to take in the organization. They're all good people, right? But it's just not the time and the place for them to desire that sort of responsibility.
mm.
Um, so I want to be clear about this because it's been my observation that such uh, life decisions made by employees are sometimes frowned upon by management
Mm.
because it may come across to them in their lenses as an unwillingness to take on greater responsibilities at the workplace, which is like, also a fair point, from the perspective of the manager. But what as agile coaches, I think it's important for us to recognize is that everybody has a different appetite for accountability at work, and therefore a different level of uh, decision rights warranted for um, their contributions and what they do at the workplace.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting point. I mean, what will be a level of positive or healthy accountability? Um,
Mhm.
yeah. Mm. So, coming back to now, if a team and wants to understand what is their sense or level of agency in this context, how can they run an experiment to understand it? Can you suggest any experiment, something they can do in order for them to do a kind of a self-assessment?
At the team level,
Yes, at the team level.
um, short of jumping onto an experiment, as small as it might be directly, I think it's perhaps more, or perhaps, yeah, more essential that they first identify what that boundary of agency looks like for them. And that might be what decisions they are allowed and not allowed to make, right? Both in practice and in theory.
Mm-hmm.
So by that I mean, this is what managers communicate that we can decide on, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in practice, maybe we could decide more and maybe we
Yes.
could decide less,
Yes.
right? Um, and then invite them to consciously think about um, what sort of boundaries would work for them collectively as a team,
Mm.
right? At this present stage, of the organization and the team, what boundaries of agency are we comfortable with?
So it's more about what I'm hearing is similar to what a reflection discussion. What are their boundaries? What are the decisions they can make, and what are the decisions what is okay for them to do, and what is not okay for them to do. Hmm.
Yes.
Hmm. But Victor, we have talked about the teams. Do you see any distinction in terms of human agency, this concept for leaders and executives?
Oh yeah, for sure.
So, what are your
As well
thoughts
as
on
for the
that?
executive. Yeah, as well as for the executive team, no less.
So, I mean, it could be. very, very, so I feel like it's a human level thing then. We don't need to, it's not connected by the roles, it's connected with the people.
Yes,
And
most
that
certainly.
person could be a Scrum Master, it could be a developer, it could be a QA, it could be a business analyst, it could be a senior manager, it could be vice president. So we're talking about a very human level reflection point here. Mm, mm,
Yes. Yes, because all of us have different boundaries of um well, all of us have different boundaries, but we also have different temperaments.
yes.
So I think this is a good segue into the notion of agreeableness because it plays into team dynamics that would determine this boundary of agency. So let
Hmm.
me give an example. Um, in a team of agreeable people that are, they work very amicably with one another, right? Um, should at one point a disagreeable team member join the group,
Hmm.
then it's almost certain that that person would take over the take over the team, in a sense, when it comes to decision making, because everyone would defer the the decision to that individual, disagreeable individual, in preference for avoidance of conflict.
Hmm.
Right.
Very Swedish, I would say.
Not very, very in many ways, um very Asian too. Particularly in societies like Singapore, in China, in Japan, we tend to be a collectivist society,
Hmm.
right? And in Singapore in particular, we have quite a strong sense of duty. And um, so
Good sense of duty in what sense?
exactly. So it could be to the sense of the team, could be to the organization, could be to the country.
Mm-hmm.
Depends on context of what we're talking about duty.
Okay.
But in general, it is to the immediate community that is in question,
Hmm.
right? And this is why we tend to have more obedient, right, citizens, if you will, call it that way, right? Um, but that's not to say they don't feel a sense of discomfort at instructions that they don't agree with,
Hmm.
right? So um, when designing the boundary of agency for teams, it is as an agile coach, it's essential to be conscious of the temperaments of the team members involved and to listen very carefully to whether they are experiencing any discomfort with deferring decisions to someone else or not.
Hmm.
And that requires a very conscious, intentional um, intervention on the part of the coach
Hmm.
to to determine as well as to then propagate this to the rest of the team and to come to a collective agreement about um, decision rights and boundaries and agency.
So I have a question, Victor. Here, when you explained about the duty, so
Yes,
if we talk about Singapore, is the power distance very big or is it smaller?
it's so if you look at the half step cultural
Yeah.
indices, right? It's considered high.
Okay.
Although in my estimation, in the East, compared with the East Asian nations, we are a little better off than some other countries.
Yeah. So I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I wanted to ask. Having creating this say sense of human agency. and defining all these boundaries, the work that you mentioned to do.
Right.
How do you find it doing it easier where the power distance gap is bigger or is smaller gap? So if you have to do
Uh,
this work the work that you're doing in Singapore, hopefully, how was your experience doing this, talking about these topics?
so I'm personally I'm quite comfortable talking about this in Singapore, being Singaporean myself, and
Mhm.
I sort of find myself being in the at a similar level of, you know, culturally when having these conversations with
Mm,
organizations.
mm,
Um, Now, that's not to say that so in general, it's I find it more straightforward to communicate this concept in a low power distance environment than a high power distance one, right? To answer your
mm,
question. However, it's also been my experience that in extremely low power distance organizational cultures,
mhm,
that this could be a problem as well.
mhm,
Because people, as I've shared earlier, don't oftentimes consider the concept of boundaries consciously. And so
mm.
they tend to conflate a sense of, or they tend to conflate agency and autonomy. These are not the same thing. That's why you see the conversation thus far, we've not talked about autonomy, right? We've talked about agency.
Yes,
When we talk about autonomy, then there's the notion of liberty,
yes.
right? And that's to me, an excess focus um, on the individual, right? Um, may not be so good when it comes to fostering team spirit, which is essential in what we do um, as
Mm,
agile coaches.
mm,
So there are both sides of the coin, in short.
mm. So, I mean, do you think that this concept works better we have talked about the power distance or the gap, uh, the culture aspect. What do you think about diversity of people? If we have a team which has people from like three different countries, one is from Singapore, from Pakistan, from Sweden, an American, and a British. What are your thoughts on that? Because it's a lot about diversity and inclusion. At least there used to be a lot of talk, but I think now it's going down. So what do you think about the diverse culture? The teams with a diverse culture.
Yes, you're right. The talk about diversity has been downtrending as of November. Um, I don't have a straight answer to that because it all depends on the individuals involved in that diversity we're talking about and their personal thinking around this.
Hmm.
I don't think there is one answer to this. I could almost say with certainty that a diversity of opinion, of cognitive ability, has seem to produce better outcomes in the longer term. Um, what we never know is how well these individuals connect in the team.
Hmm.
This, I think, is highly individual. We probably both of us have seen it work both ways before.
Yeah, the reason I asked that question because I wanted to take your input on this one.
Hmm.
I happened to work with a team which was diverse, and we had people from Poland, we had people from Russia, from Sweden, from India, and what it turned out to be that the company where it is based, it is a Swedish company, that influenced more as a culture of the team. And even though like people from Poland, India, Russia, they have their own culture, but when we were like discussing things together, that turned out to be a new team culture. So they developed their own sense of belonging in that team, and oftentimes I have noticed people from different culture. They were talking about their holidays, their vacations, and so I felt like they brought different cultures together, and that gave them their own sense of belonging.
Yes. Well, I would indulge in a team like that if I had the privilege of
I would
of
say I think those were really good teams, and I enjoyed a lot. I can also say that, I mean, you just bottom lined with a simple yes, but I would say when I reflected on that, I realized that the management and the leaders there, they have given them a kind of a freedom to do the work, to choose the work they want to do, and they choose how to do that. I mean, we cannot say that when we talk about freedom or what you want to choose, there were certain boundaries, and we can
yeah,
call them enabling constraints. Yeah,
right.
we can do these things on here. This is the boundary. You can stay within this boundary and implement the solution. But if you can go out, if you want to go out the boundary, then you have to convince other people that why the other solution is much more valuable than the one we are talking right now. And I can say that the teams where we were able to achieve that level of discussion, that turned out to be really productive team. And as a coach, I enjoyed working them, and I enjoyed giving them more challenges. So very similar to one. I mean, I have been able to realize this after having this conversation with you, Victor. Is perhaps sometimes there are things happening around us, but we are not aware of them. We need to connect some words with them. We need to connect some concepts with them. Now, and I know we it looks like quite an interesting concept. Definitely, I will read more about it and get in touch with you to understand it. So, for you personally, what is your top? What is your most favorite book that has impacted on your thinking, other than human agency, but in general, no, in general,
Wow. Okay. Well, I have to say, that book would be Inviting Leadership by Daniel Mezick.
inviting
Uh,
leadership by.
Daniel Mezick.
Okay, okay.
So I would encourage everyone who is interested in uh, the notion of invitation or the utility of invitation in engaging an organization to pick up that book.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, you're right. Kuram, it's a huge domain, when we talk about agency, because it crosses into culture, which again, and it's a big topic on its own. It crosses into organizational psychology, organizational behavior,
Yes,
and we do what we do by way of um experiments and sensing, right?
yes.
And I love that you used the term enabling constraint, right, which speak to Canavian, right, essentially, and how we, as human beings, tend to find ourselves naturally gravitating towards in complex environments.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, we touched on the notion of willingness to adopt greater responsibility and accountability, the importance of delegating commensurate decision rights to the set accountability, right? And different motivations for different people
Mm-hmm.
and cross-cultural diverse teams. All of these are factors, if we will frame it that way, that influence the boundaries of decision rights and therefore agency, right? It's as simple as it may seem at first. It's actually quite a complex endeavor, right?
Mm.
Setting and maintaining, designing, setting and maintaining this boundary.
Yeah, I think it's a what I have observed, like there have been people looking at the same situations, challenges from a different lenses, and they're coming up with their level of understanding to understand that challenge. And what you have been describing in terms of human agency, in terms of self-management, willingness, accountability, I do see that being from an agile thought leadership perspective. These are points which we want to have in a continuous learning organizations as well in our situational leadership and those kind of concepts. But yeah, quite interesting. Oh, perhaps I should have asked this question earlier, but this question just came to my thought right now. Who introduced you to this human agency concept? How did you ended up understanding about it or learning about it?
Well, the author of that book, Mr.
Okay,
Daniel Mezick himself.
okay. Uh-huh. So, I mean, I looked up this book and looks quite interesting. I will have I mean, we'll look into it. Looks interesting. Okay, good. Victor, of course, we can talk more about it, and this is not the only topic that we can talk about. Thank you very much for giving your time and sharing your perspective about the human agency.
It's my
Hopefully,
pleasure.
to meet you online or in person somewhere else in other gatherings. So, thank you very much, our listeners. And if you have any questions, I will definitely leave a link to get in touch with Victor. And if you like this podcast, please share it with someone who might benefit from it. So until next time, thank you very much and see you next time.